Welcome to the Funding Blueprint, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of startups, innovation, and social impact. I'm your host, Avraham, and today's episode promises to be an enlightening exploration into the realm of entrepreneurship and startup accelerators. Our guest today is Deepak Menon, the Chief Program Officer at Village Capital, a global venture development organization that supports early-stage entrepreneurs addressing social and environmental changes. Deepak brings a wealth of experience and expertise to the table, having been part of Village Capital's program delivery team since 2016. Before joining Village Capital, Deepak spent 5 years with MVille Health Info Services, a health startup based in Bangalore, India, where he served as the Chief Operating Officer. Prior to that, he immersed himself in the impact space for over a decade, working with nonprofits and corporations in various roles focused on the intersection of social impact, small business, and technology. Deepak is a seasoned professional with a passion for driving positive change through entrepreneurship and innovation. Today, we'll delve deep into Deepak's journey, his insights into program delivery, and the impactful work being done at Village Capital. So without further ado, let's welcome Deepak to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that this conversation is interesting for people who are looking to learn more about the space or understand more about the work that we do at Village Capital.
Likewise, the pleasure is all ours. I want to hop right in and kind of talk about the startup journey is often portrayed as a thrilling ascent, fueled by innovation and fueled by venture capital. But there's a critical support system behind the scenes, entrepreneur support organizations, or otherwise known as ESOs, which serve in a very similar fashion to accelerators and incubators. These organizations are the bootstrappers' best friends, offering guidance, resources, and a launchpad for early stage businesses. Yet a surprising truth emerges. ESOs in emerging markets often face their own funding struggles. While securing capital for startups is a constant challenge, what about the organizations that empower them? So, Deepak, what are some of the biggest hurdles ESOs face when it comes to securing sustainable funding for their own operations?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it's an emerging area, the discussion around ESOs or entrepreneur support organizations. Village Capital is one of those as well. At a different scale and with a global footprint, but essentially that's what we are. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation around this critical support framework that most people may not be familiar with or may not really come into contact with. So we've done support programs for ESOs in multiple geographies. We've worked with ESOs in sub-Saharan Africa, in the US, in Colombia, most recently in the MENA region. And we worked with ESOs that operate in some of the hardest to serve regions in the world, but these are also some of the highest impact potential regions in the world. And the ESOs essentially, just in a nutshell, they provide tailored support, guidance, and resources for startups, particularly early stage startups, to help fuel their business success and their growth, to help them overcome obstacles, to essentially help them thrive. And by doing this, ESOs contribute to the overall resilience and success of this community, the entrepreneurial community. However, like you said, ESOs themselves face numerous challenges, and we have seen this across all our programs, starting with, I think our earliest work in the space was in 2017 in sub-Saharan Africa, and most recently we've worked in the MENA region, our MENA Ecosystem Builders program, supported by the Dutch Good Growth Fund. And across the spectrum of work, we have seen that broadly, the two biggest issues that ESOs deal with are strategic growth and financial sustainability. And I'll break this down a little bit more. So, when we're thinking about strategic growth, what we're essentially saying is that ESOs lack the funding to invest into their own internal operations, their their own project management structures, and even to invest into their team, into their talent development, right? So, and then they lack the funding very often to think about even to think about effectively assessing their own programs. So they so accurately measuring the impact of their programs, improving their effectiveness and accountability, all of this general operations kind of funding, ESOs typically lack because the funding that they get is very restricted to programmatic funding. So that really gets in the way of their growth. And then, of course, that in turn then affects the quality of the services they're able to provide their startups. It affects their own financial sustainability, because this restricted funding then implies that they're not, as I said, they're not able to invest into themselves. But then ESOs are also often unable to establish additional sources of revenue, offer paid services, or provide things like subscription-based tools, largely again because of the audiences they serve being unable to pay for these things. And so, and then sort of underlying all of this, or maybe because of all of this, right? Because it's sort of a chicken and egg situation. It's very hard for ESOs to cultivate a culture of collaboration within their markets. A culture like that would really help them avoid duplication, to sort of collaborate on services, avoid operating in silos, and together serve their entrepreneurs better and reach out to larger audiences. But that is something that they also find really hard to spend time building and sustaining, largely because of they are all competing for the same resources, the same grants, and the same talent in the same markets.
Right. Right. So it is very difficult in a way, but it's the most impactful in those specific regions, which is quite interesting. But the emerging markets are brimming with promising startups, which have tackling unique challenges, and they offer a lot of innovative solutions. Yet convincing investors to take a chance on these ventures can be an uphill battle. The perceived risk associated with emerging markets can lead to an investor's skepticism. But these ESOs play a crucial role in really bridging this gap. So, Deepak, with your experience, can you talk to us a little bit more about how ESOs can act as a bridge between early stage startups in emerging markets and the potential investors? And also, really, what are some strategies do we employ to de-risk these ventures and build greater confidence in the overall entrepreneurial ecosystem of these regions?
Sure. I think you used the word, use the word bridge. So that's exactly what these users are, and they are essentially intermediaries. We think of them as ecosystem intermediaries in these markets, and they work on both sides of the table. Right? They work with startups to help these startups achieve business success metrics and improve their investment readiness. And ESOs do this in a number of ways. They provide targeted training and mentorship programs. They help with financial modeling, business planning. They provide support services like internal financial ops, legal compliance services. They help with impact measurement, what have you. ESOs help essentially work with startups to help not them hit their business milestones, and then also attract capital and connect with that capital, and even think about how they might deploy that capital. So that's what they do on this side of the equation. And then on the other side, ESOs are critical for creating curated high quality pipeline for investors. And this is across types of capital structures, across investor risk preferences. And ESOs typically bring a very deep understanding of local context and market opportunities and the local market operating realities. And this can really help them calibrate investor expectations and also figure out how to match investor expectations. And then also, especially when it's investors from other markets, also align with what is doable locally and what is of value locally, right? And which are the solutions that really best fit the local markets, while at the same time looking towards scale, sustainability, the things that a startup needs just to be able to grow. And so that ESOs on both sides of this, whether working with startups as well as working with investors, are extremely critical in terms of curating this pipeline, and then not just curating, curating is sort of a slightly later step, but even in just building this pipeline, but just going out there and working with the startups. And we have found in our work that local ESO partners in the regions we work in are invaluable in terms of helping us. And this is, I'm talking about our programs where we work directly with entrepreneurs, right? So in our entrepreneur facing programs, we found local ESO partners to be critical in helping us with thinking about what types of startups exist in this market, who should we be targeting within the broad framework of the impact-oriented early stage startup that Village Capital typically works with. Within each market, what are the nuances? How should we think about these nuances when we think about our selection criteria? How should we design these programs? Our local ESO partners are invaluable in helping us with that kind of thinking and design for our own programs. So,
Right. Right. So you mentioned that startup founders are trying to track certain success metrics through these ESOs. Can you share and shed some light about what are some metrics that these startup founders are trying to track?
sure. We're thinking, I'll break that down into a couple of things. The startup founders' success metrics, and then the success metrics of the ESOs, right? If that's okay, I'll sort of break it down because as you know, we work with both audiences, and when we work with ESOs, we typically have them report back on the internal improvements they've been able to achieve through the course of the program. And then we do a lot of post-program follow-through data collection with the ESOs. And this essentially breaks into two parts. One part is the impact of the work on the ESO itself. And that I'm referring to our programs as the framework here, but what I'm about to say are generally the metrics that most ESOs or most programs that support ESOs, of which there are very few, would typically measure as an indicator of success or impact on the ESO itself. Improved operational efficiency of the ESO, improved financial sustainability, improvement in the quality of the programs or services they offer to entrepreneurs, hiring or retention of high quality talent. Yeah, yeah, these are better impact metrics on their part to show the success of the entrepreneurs they work with, and that's the second bucket I'll get to. So these few things I mentioned are essentially how we think about the ESO success. And then the entrepreneur success in turn typically are the are we measure it. You have to think about it in three buckets, right? One is direct outputs from the program, which would be things like, are the entrepreneurs satisfied with the program? How many connections did they make with potential partners or potential investors? How many conversations did they have? The direct output um, metrics that come out of the program. Then you have a bucket which is essentially longer term outcomes for the entrepreneur related to their business. So that could be things like growth in revenue, capital raised post program, growth in acquisition of customers. It could be increase in number of jobs. So a lot of startups are a lot of what they do results in job creation in their community. So this could be one aspect of their success. And then the third bucket, which is also longer term, even more longer term than this often, and this is where we start thinking about impact oriented startups or SDG aligned startups, and what do their impact metrics in relation to the sector that they work in, whether it be agriculture, climate, health, what have you. What does that start looking like because of their engagement with the ESO program? So this is broadly the bucket of metrics that most startups look at for their own success, and that ESOs typically would track to understand the impact of their programs on their startups.
Right, and that's interesting. I mean, you know that the traditional model often focuses on the financial and more the final beneficiary, which is ultimately the funded startup. However, these Village Capital takes a more holistic approach, which recognizes the vital role of entrepreneurial support systems and organizations in nurturing these ventures. So instead of solely funding startups, Village Capital also invests into ESOs. So, can you elaborate on the rationale behind this seemingly counterintuitive approach? Why do you believe it's crucial to support both sides of the equation to promote a truly thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Sure. So building a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem, even maintaining one, right? Even in a very mature entrepreneurial ecosystem, this requires longer term strategic thinking. It requires understanding of socio-cultural factors, geopolitical factors, ton of things. It requires engagement with multiple stakeholders, investors, the government, industry partners, talent markets. And the ESOs, in our view, are skilled intermediaries with deep local knowledge and networks. And this knowledge and the networks are essential for reducing barriers to capital access and growth for startups. And this becomes even more crucial in markets where the barriers are many, whether it's in terms of infrastructure, whether it's in terms of investor perception, maybe just availability of money within the market, and then of course other factors which result in certain categories of founders becoming sort of hugely underrepresented or underserved in the capital market. So gender is a factor, race is a factor, educational background is a factor, all of this, right? So it's and so ESOs have the bring a lot to the table in terms of their ability to be able to understand these barriers, reduce these barriers, and build the networks and communities of staff support that these startups need. So essentially, the way we think of it is that ESOs provide startups with relevant communities of support and within their market and operating environment. And it's relevant because it's local, it's contextual, it really helps the startups access and leverage the resources and skills they need to build the sustainable and scalable solutions that they're offering.
You mentioned that building a robust startup ecosystem requires a strong foundation, which is what we talked about earlier. And Village Capital as well understands this, and they have a program called the MENA program. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's right.
So this MENA is like an ecosystem builders program. So for our listeners who are not aware of Village Capital's MENA program, in essence, it's an accelerator that supports ESOs based in Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, Palestine, and Tunisia. The program is specifically focused on locally led ESOs capacity, building them with the tools and networks they need to serve entrepreneurs more effectively. And in essence, this attracts capital to high potential youth-led ventures and build strong connections with key stakeholders across the region. So let's kind of delve deeper into the MENA Ecosystem Builders program. What were some of the key objectives you set out to achieve with this initiative? And additionally, can you share some measurable results that showcase the program's impact on the capacity of the participating ESOs?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, have run programs that entrepreneur support programs, of course, and then also ESO support programs across different parts of the world. And the MENA, or the Middle East North Africa Ecosystem Builders Program, is our most is the one that we that just concluded. So the most recent one, and a couple of others ongoing in other geographies. Now, this program is supported by the Dutch Good Growth Fund, and who have been quite valuable for a while now, a really valuable and insightful thought partner in thinking about entrepreneurial ecosystems in general to us. And so the program essentially aimed at improving the sustainability and impact of locally led ESOs in the region. So representative from the geographies that you mentioned, and then locally led as opposed to branches of ESOs from outside. Like we don't have a village capital MENA. The way we work is we work externally, we work with local partners like these ESOs to work with the entrepreneurs. And that's how we really got to um, working with the ESOs directly, right? The whole experience of understanding how powerful working with local ESOs can be. And so, I'm digressing a bit, but just to step back, so we don't have a Village Capital MENA office. We do have a Village Capital MENA team that works with ESOs and entrepreneurs in the region. And so, um, the the program essentially began with the landscape study that we did, and this was part of the program roadmap as discussed with the Dutch Good Growth Fund. So we started with the landscape study, and in with through that study, we learned that like in many emerging markets, the MENA ecosystem, startup ecosystem is fragmented, and again, it's facing the challenge of duplicative support services and duplicative in some cases, completely missing in other cases. And so we realized that the growth of early stage business has been shown to increase job creation and contribute to the region's development. But then the startups themselves who are doing this are not able to, the ecosystem itself is constrained by the lack of resources and support for the startups themselves, right? Unless they're able to get that support externally from outside the ecosystem. And so and despite local ESOs being critical to building an investable pipeline and critical to supporting these startups, there are very few ESO programs that currently actually lead to investment outcomes. And so we took what we've done in other regions and worked with the Good Growth Fund to think about how to build it out for the MENA region. And you mentioned the geographies: Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, Palestine, and Tunisia. We worked with 12 locally led ESOs, and essentially the program helped them refine their offerings and think about how to develop programs that effectively support startups in the region and strengthen the ecosystem as a whole. So the program again breaks into two parts broadly. One was essentially them thinking about how to assess the quality of their services, how to think about their own financial sustainability, their talent strategies, their business strategies, and collaboration with each other in that ecosystem across all these countries, right? Which is a beautiful thing in any ecosystem when you see groups come together like this. And then that's one bucket. But then the other bucket is, well, this is for themselves, but what are the frameworks and tools that they can apply that help them serve their entrepreneurs better? It's linked, of course, to the quality of their services and products, but it's also tangible tools and frameworks that they can use to work with their entrepreneurs directly. And that's what essentially the program is all about, as well as connections with mentors in the region, investors, and then um, you know mentors who had worked in ESO environments in other regions and the lessons that they brought from their government contacts, the policymakers. So again, discussion with mentors to really understand how they could build collaborations with these different stakeholder groups and how that could help them work better for their entrepreneurs. And as a result of the program, finally, we saw a few uh, strong patterns emerge, right? So there's a much stronger understanding of their own financial sustainability in terms of what kind of different revenue streams they could think of possibly, and then also they built stronger relationships through the mentor interaction with investors themselves, right? The investors who would in turn be the market for their entrepreneurs, and really think of expanded and deepened their networks. So I think that was a big takeaway from the program, just bringing everyone together, just help them build these relationships. There are tools and methodologies that we ourselves and you have used and that we have used successfully in our programs, and other ESOs we've worked with have used as well, which really help enhance the investment readiness of the startups the ESOs work with. So access to those tools and methodologies and training on how to apply those. And then I think one really important thing that came out of this was essentially a community of practice for continuous knowledge sharing and collaboration. And and I think we all maybe are a little sick of conferences and how much it's very exciting at the conference, but how much it takes then to keep that momentum going. I think, and when I say we, I don't just mean the startup or the startup support ecosystem. I just mean globally around any topic, right? And but I think that if you are able to build a community of practice that takes forward the collaboration and knowledge sharing that something like a conference or an event actually initiates, then it can be very powerful as long as you're able to build and nurture that community and they have tangible processes that they follow and ways of assessing the outcomes of that knowledge sharing and collaboration. I think the beginnings of that community and practice in this region, in the MENA region, emerged through this program. So that again, I think that maybe is the biggest learning for us to see how they came together and how they work together.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, are there any other programs that follow a very similar philosophy to the MENA program, but like tackle different regions?
Our methodology with when we work with ESOs is similar to what we do with entrepreneurs. We fundamentally work in sort of an acceleration mode. So the official program that Village Capital and the Dutch Good Growth Fund ran together is it has closed. But I think the collaborations that the participating ESOs have with each other, as well as the collaborations that we have been fortunate to build with them, we are privileged to be part of that community and continue to engage with them. I think that will continue. The goal of programs like this is to help create that, and then it must continue. We hope it will continue, and we will continue to engage with them, and we continue to sort of try and understand where we can help in terms of their support needs or the support needs of the entrepreneurs that they work with. So in that sense, I don't think the Village Capital program is ever done. I think we closed the program officially, but I think the ripple effect of that is what yeah, we really hope for.
We've discussed the challenges faced by ESOs and how Village Capital's approach supports both startups and the organizations that empower them. Now let's kind of explore the long-term benefits of this strategy. You know, the nurturing startups is widely recognized as a driver of job creation, but Village Capital argues that investing in ESOs goes beyond that. So can you elaborate on how supporting ESOs contributes to building a more robust and collaborative environment within the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Oh, we work across regions. We worked in Colombia. We've we do similar work in the US. We work in Sub-Saharan Africa. So there are a number of different regions where we do similar programs. And so with a variety of funders. So it's nice to it's exciting to see how much interest there is in this whole entrepreneur support ecosystem as a holistic environment and not just the entrepreneurs as these isolated entities. So
So, the impact of entrepreneur support organizations can be multifaceted, making it tricky to define a single measure of success. Village Capital, with its focus on strengthening ESOs, understands the need for effective evaluation methods. So, how does Village Capital approach measuring the impact of these programs? Are there certain metrics that you use to gauge the success of your initiatives in terms of ESO development and ultimately the success of the startups? And is it really both quantitative and qualitative factors that you consider?
Um, all of it, both quantitative as well as qualitative. And I think I mentioned some of this a little earlier. We track ESOs through the program. We have measures in place to really for them to be able to um, tell us, of course, about the effectiveness of the program in terms of were the sessions useful, were the mentors relevant, all of that. But then also track their own internal improvement during the program, because program has would essentially be a series of workshops. There are gaps between the workshops, so they can go back and apply their learnings, and then come back and in the follow-up workshop tell us about internal improvements that they have been may have been able to make. And then we also try and do a lot of post-program follow-through, the data survey collection, and in fact, for a lot of our ESO programs, we try to include a component where we support the ESOs with M&Es for their own programs for a period of time after they complete our program. So essentially, that is, we do our own M&E, like I said, post-program to understand the impact of the ESOs. Again, improved operational efficiency, better retention and hiring of talent, improved financial sustainability. But then we also very often try to build in a component where we can support them to conduct M&E on their own entrepreneur-facing programs and report back on, again, entrepreneur satisfaction, on a longer-term capital raised, job creation, revenue growth by the entrepreneurs hitting impact outcomes. Essentially, again, if you're speaking about mission-oriented SDJ-aligned entrepreneurs, then helping them design the ESO's M&E as part of their programs would often involve helping those entrepreneurs design their impact frameworks and implement those. So those are things that we actually actively try to support with. That said, it's a longer term process. You really need to. We're talking about very systemic change here, and we're talking about ecosystem level improvements or not. I mean, if there isn't an improvement or something messes things up. So it does require a sustained period of evaluation.
That's great. I mean, these insights have been quite helpful. This is actually our first episode where we actually dig deep into ESOs. So, no better candidate than Deepak to kind of talk about that and the impactful work that Village Capital is doing. So, really want to thank you for your time, for coming on here. And we want to express our sincere gratitude for sharing your valuable insights about the crucial and critical role of entrepreneurial support organizations and ESOs when it comes to promoting vibrant startup ecosystems, especially in emerging markets. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking conversations with industry experts like Deepak. For listeners interested in learning more about Deepak and Village Capital, we'll have their links to their website and social media in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.